if we can have some, I don't use the word protection, if we can have some facilitation for our local manufacturing sector, for the cost of employment and for the cost of giving some employment and some growth for our industry, we have to live for some margin for cascading for these kind of products. This is unfortunate policy direction, I think, which this country has to adopt, because we cannot, in my personal view, maybe I am wrong, we cannot convert, and we should not see this country equivalent to Dubai or Hong Kong or Singapore, which are basically trading states. We can afford trading state, but we have a very large population and very large level of unemployment and very large population to live with. So we have to give some margin for cascading, and I think that will stay.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, as much as questions our speakers would like to entertain at this juncture, but time constraint is there, so we are closing this session. Before I invite our chief guest, Mr. Shaukat Tareen, former Federal Minister for Finance and Economic Affairs, to address before this august house, I would like to introduce him. Mr. Tareen, a business graduate, majored in finance, started his career with Citibank in Pakistan in 1975 and worked there for almost 22 years. During his association with Citibank, he served as country manager of UAE, Oman, Pakistan and Thailand. In 1997, when the government introduced banking reforms in Pakistan, Mr. Tareen was appointed as the chairman of one of the largest nationalized bank, Habib Bank Limited. During his able leadership, HBL recorded unprecedented success in its operation. In June 2000, he assumed the position of chairman of Union Bank, which was subsequently sold to Standard Chartered Bank. Mr. Tareen also served as the chairman of Pakistan Banks Association, Karachi Stock Exchange, and National Commodity Exchange Limited. In 2008, he had taken over charge as the president and CEO of Saudi Pak Commercial Bank Limited, which is now Silk Bank. In October 2008, he was appointed as advisor to the Prime Minister of Pakistan on finance and economic affairs. And for a very short period of 6 months, he served as a Federal Minister for Finance and Economic Affairs. He has also received 2 national prestigious awards, Quaid-e-Azam Gold Medal Award from the Governor State Bank of Pakistan for his contribution to the banking industry. Sitara-e-Imtiaz, a civil award conferred by the President of Pakistan for his contribution to public service. With these words, I would now like to invite Mr. Shaukat Tareen to please come forward for his keynote address. Please warmly welcome him.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yusuf Shirazi Saab, respected speakers, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. I think, we have had a long day, and so you don't want me to speak here for a long time, but I clearly would like to say a few things which I believe, have been raised by all of you, have been discussed over here by the speakers, and I like to give you my perspective. To start with, what is wrong with our economy? And why are we struggling after 62 years? I think number one, what is wrong with our economy, that we lack resources. We lack resources because we have a very low tax to GDP ratio. And this year it will probably barely cross 10%. I think 10.2% or so. And we have a saving rate of 14%. Saving rates in India, China are in excess of 30%. The rule of thumb is that your growth rate, sustainable growth rate, is 1/4 of your saving rate. So if China has got a 36% saving rate, they can sustain a 9% GDP growth over a period of time. If India has 32%, so they can sustain an 8% growth rate over a period of time. The tax to GDP of China is almost 21%, India is approaching 20%, Sri Lanka is 17%, we are 10%. We are bad. And I think this has not gone beyond 12.5% in our entire history. I could be wrong by 1% or here or there. On the other side, we also waste a lot of resources. We have public sector enterprises, 8 of them lose 245 billion rupees a year. These are companies, these are industries like any other industry you and me run. We make money, they lose money. We then have misguided and non-targeted subsidies. Why the hell should I get subsidy on gas? Why should I be subsidized on petrol? But we do. So they are misguided and non-targeted. Then I think it was being mentioned by, I think, Nakwisa, the development funds which we just we spend, they are gross mismanagement and cost overruns. So this I'm giving you authentic numbers. Every 1 rupee of PSDB we plan, we end up spending 2 rupees, which is the 100% cost overruns. Which means if we just did those things on time, in an efficient manner, for last year's PSDB of 280 billion, or so, we would be saving 250 billion. But we actually will be spending not 280, but 560 billion. And then lack of austerity. Look at the way we live. I think by some estimates, we have dozen of aircrafts. We basically have a plethora of motor cars, and the austerity plan, which I along with others we authored, which has been notified in January. I don't see much happening, not anything mentioned in the budget. So when this happens, when you do not have your tax to GDP and low saving rates, so you basically are suspect to booms and busts. All along, when you say your average, your growth rate has been, 5% plus, if you look at those growth rates, over the last 62 years, you will have a boom, and then there's a bust, and then there's a boom, and there is a bust, and I think average is 5%, but we do have, times when we basically have grown by more than 7.5%. So lack of resources. And when do we grow, rapidly? We grow when we get Manol Salva from outside. जब हमें aid मिलती है, whether it was the 60s because we supported Seattle Cento, or it was 1979 when we supported Afghan war, or 2001 onwards when we supported the 9/11, we basically get a lot of inside revenues coming in, supports our growth. And when it is withdrawn, we just basically, it is not sustainable. So what happens is that, the government of Pakistan is short on resources, so all the time it is indulging in deficit financing and even printing notes. And as I was mentioning, a period of 15 months, we printed 1,350 billion rupees of notes. Now that causes not only inflation. When you have inflation, it also causes unstable, it causes instability in your currency, in your exchange rates. We have barely at 10%, and plus if you add another 2.5%, 3% of the non-tax revenues, we barely have the revenues to meet our current expenditure. And I think you guys understand what current expenditure is. We have no money for our development. Last year, the entire development expenditure was funded through borrowings, both local and foreign. Well, this also, as somebody was saying, leads to crowding out of the private sector, because if you are not printing notes and you're going into the market, and if you go to the market for 300 to 400 billion rupees, you basically are taking a big chunk out of the monetary aggregates which have been destined for the country for that year. Now, when you have less obviously revenues and you waste money, then there are other issues which arise. The biggest issue out of this is that we have poverty levels which have exceeded 30%. But then you will say that, well, there were times when our poverty levels had come down to 18% or so. and 17%. And remember what I said,